It's a very common task in JavaScript to need to locate a specific node in the DOM of a web page so that you can do something with it, whether that's changing it, or deleting it, or copying it, etc. There are several ways to locate a specific node. I'll go over 4 of them. I'll also discuss briefly modifying the attributes of an HTML element in JavaScript. We'll use this web page as a demonstration. This code has been provided for you in the lesson page. I'll be modifying the code as part of this demonstration, so I suggest that you download the code and follow along on your side for that part. Here you see 4 buttons. Clicking on each of them has the same result. It changes the color of the text above it. However, each of these buttons are using a different way to do it, and of course changing it to a different color. Let's go look at the code. I'm using CSS and JavaScript here internally for the ease of demonstration, but again I want to mention that in the real world, you want to use external styles and scripts. You can see that I have the 4 buttons set up for each to use an onClick event handler to fire off a different function. Let's look at what these functions are doing. Notice that these statements in each of these function bodies start with the word document. We've run into this word before. Let me take a moment now to discuss it. The keyword document in JavaScript references the HTML document that is running the code. Its data type is that of an object, which we have not yet discussed, and it's beyond the scope of this introductory course to do so. However, that is where we get the name DOM from, the document object model. The document object is itself considered to be a node in the DOM tree, the very first one. This first function uses DOM traversal, which you learned about in the previous lesson. You can start at a particular node such as the document, then go down the tree using node relations. Here, I figured out that the paragraph element I want to change is the 3rd child of the 2nd child of the 1st child of the document. Then I'm using the node's style.color property to change the color by assigning it a new value of red. This is like setting an attribute of style equals color red in the HTML, but this is how we can do it in JavaScript. Now, this way of locating a specific node is actually the worst way. You have to do a lot more work to try to figure out its exact path in the DOM. And if anything changes in the HTML page, if one element is added or removed in the wrong place, then suddenly the whole thing is broken. You can do things this way, but there are much better approaches. This second function uses a method called getElementsByTagName. We use it on the document, then we look for every element that has a particular tag name, such as p, which we provide as an argument. This method will return a list of every element with that tag name, even if there's only one. We can access a particular element by using bracket notation and an index number. So if we use bracket 0 at the end, that will give us the very first element with that tag name in the document. This could be a good method to use if you need to get every element of a particular type in a document. However, if you're just trying to get a single element, then it's not the best way, since you have to know what order the element you want appears in. And if the HTML changes, and a new p element is added above the one that you want, then your code is broken. This third function is much more specific. It uses an ID to target the element directly. Here in the HTML, you see that the paragraph element that we're trying to locate has an ID attribute styled on it, text to change. Then in this third function, we're using document.getElementById. Then we give it the ID name as an argument. Since there should be only one element with this ID in this document, this lets us directly access that element. For a long time, this was the preferred way of targeting a specific node in the DOM, so you will see this code being used everywhere. And it's still a good choice to use. It works well. However, there is a more recent method that is now often the preferred way to target a specific node. It's this one that you see in the 4th function, querySelector. We use it like this, document.querySelector. Then you can give it a CSS selector. In this case, I'm using the same ID, And just as I use a hash in front of an ID selector in CSS, I'm using that here. The nice thing about this method is that it's quite flexible and powerful. I can use any CSS selector, including more complex selectors, not just IDs. I could do this, for example. And if you downloaded this code and you're following along with me, I suggest that you type this in yourself as well. What this will do is target the first button element that comes directly after a P element and change its background to blue. Let's see it in the browser. And you see how that works. You can use classes, element names, IDs, attribute selectors, anything that you can normally use with CSS. However, note that this will only give you back the very first element that it finds that matches the selector. So if you're trying to get more than one element back, you'll need to use a different method called querySelectorAll, which returns a node list of all nodes matching your selector. I won't be demonstrating it here, but you're welcome to look into it. Finally, I want to start discussing how you can change HTML elements via JavaScript. You've seen a few times by now how we can access the style attribute of HTML elements by saying .style after a given node. In JavaScript, we call this the style property. Then we can further access the color property of the style property by saying style.color. Most HTML element attributes can be accessed in JavaScript by using properties in this way, not just the style. For example, instead of changing the style.background, I could access the hidden attribute of this button element and change it to true. Let's try that. Now if I click on this fourth button at the end here, it will hide the first button. You see how that went away. We'll look some more at this later, and I've included some links in the additional resources of this lessons page for you to check out on your own. And if you haven't yet, you can also download the code for this demonstration there as well. In the next lesson, we're going to look at how we can create nodes and add them to the DOM.